Hello and welcome. I'm Gina Maier Vincent with Exquisitely Aligned. I'm delighted to share this time with you today. Today, I want to talk about two invitations that we receive in life and how we can change them from obstacles and bring them into opportunities. I like to say there's two different types of invitations, whether you think about them as coming in life, from the universe, from your creator, however you like to think about them. First one would be frightened and then enlightened, and the second one, intimidating and intriguing at the same time. So frightened, that can move into enlightenment if we let it, and then intimidating and intriguing at the same time. And these two different invitations appear in so many different ways. Oftentimes we find them in our health, in our wealth, financially, career, you name it, and then in our love relationships or just relationships in general. So frightened and enlightened. Oftentimes that is something we are not expecting. It catches us off guard. We feel like the rug has been pulled out from beneath us. I know it happened to me more than once in my life. When I was young, I lost my job. I was unemployed. It was frightening. And then I found the enlightenment because I realized that that company I was working for was not in alignment with who I am and who I am here to be. It happened again on the heels of adopting our young daughter from Guatemala. When our son was in kindergarten, she was then 2. Mark, my husband, was waiting for a kidney and liver transplant on our 10-year anniversary. It was extremely frightening, but it led to such enlightenment, not just for myself, but my husband as he healed. He did receive a kidney and liver transplant nearly 15 years ago, almost to the day. And that's kind of how I started my business. And it evolved and continued to evolve and still to this day is evolving. And I love what I do. So I'm thankful that that traumatic time that we were going through as a family has proven to be enlightening. And then intimidating and intriguing. That is when we feel little butterflies in our stomach, kind of like when you start dating somebody. You're excited, you don't know what the future holds. Well, the same is true. We receive these invitations where somebody may say something to you or offer something to you, maybe to be a guest on their podcast, to publish an article for them, maybe to write a book, a collaboration book, or write your own book. Maybe it's stepping out of your comfort zone, whatever way, shape, or form that is. Years ago, several people who didn't know each other all said the same sentence: Gina, you should have a podcast. And I looked at them like they had 12 heads and said, no, thank you, and went on my merry way. But years later, as I lived here in California, someone said to me, you should have a podcast. And I kind of scratched my head and said, maybe I should. And now here I am, having finished 4 seasons, and I'm on my 5th season. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been great joy. Yes, it was extremely intimidating because it was something I had never done before. But there was that intrigue, that what if, what would come? Who might I meet? Where might it take me? And so today I want to ask you, if someone has said, or in the future, if someone says something that just intrigues you in a way that you have butterflies in your belly, to really step back and ask yourself, what may unfold? And I invite you to open yourself up to these possibilities because they are abundant. Not every single one of them. If it doesn't feel right, then pass it up. But if it does feel right, I invite you to step into them. Today, I'd like to share with you Opening to Possibilities. It's a deck of 42 cards. It's the first of two decks that I designed back in 2017. And inside, you'll find a tiny little pamphlet or a handbook as to how to use them, creative different ways. They were designed to help people go deeper into opening to their possibilities, each and every single one of them, in time, because this is not something that most people can rush into. Oftentimes it takes time. So you can use these as journal prompts, contemplation, maybe meditation, or conversation starters. I love pulling a card at the end of my podcast and television show. I usually ruffle through them. There's 42, they're flowers, each one has a word on them. And then on the back, there's a statement with 3 questions. There we go. And so let me just pick one for you today. I'm going to shuffle through one more time. Ooh, goodness. I'm not shuffling as well as I usually do. And let's just go right here. Intentions. This is perfect. So when we live our life with intention, I think it becomes easier. Let's see what we have here. Intentions energetically influence your mind. Do you consciously work with intentions? How do intentions effectively shape your life? What intention is important to you right now? I love going through my day with intention. I invite my kids to do the same, and especially my clients, because I think when we align energetically with that intention, all the other small stuff kind of just falls away, falls to the wayside. And what's truly important to us, what really resonates with us or aligns with us, comes to the forefront. Till next time, be exquisite.
Welcome to Uncut with Lucia. I'm Lucia Matuonto, and we are thrilled to be back at the RV Book Fair 2023. Joining me today is my co-host for this event, Pat Backley. Pat has authored 7 books and has been my co-host since the inaugural RV Book Fair in 2022. So, my dear Pat, welcome to the RV Book Fair.
Thank you so much, Lucia. It's a delight to be here again, and I'm really excited about talking to these lovely people. Only one who I've met before, so that's pretty exciting. Today, we're excited to introduce you to 3 incredible authors who will discuss navigating suspense, exploring the skies, and finding hope in words. First, let's introduce, and please forgive me if I pronounce your names incorrectly. Okay, first of all, we'd like to welcome Lisa Skinner, the author of Not All Who Wander Need Be Lost, Stories of Hope for Families Facing Alzheimer's and Dementia, which is a huge topic. Welcome, Lisa. Perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Skinner, and I am a certified dementia practitioner. I'm a certified dementia trainer. I hold a degree in human behavior, and I have been counseling families on living better with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia for about 30 years now. And my second book is called Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's, Its Secret Faces. And one thing that's kind of unique about me is, in addition to me helping families navigate the tremendous challenges that come along with this disease, I personally have had 8 family members also live with one of the brain diseases that causes dementia, and believe it or not, a dog. I actually had a dog that was diagnosed with canine cognitive dysfunction, which is synonymous with doggy dementia. And 5 of those relatives were blood relatives. The other 3 were through. So I think there's no question in my mind whatsoever that this is my calling in life. And I'm very passionate and dedicated to helping families through this journey so they'll have an easier time with it. It's a very difficult disease to navigate.
Yeah. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. I think you have so many stories to tell us.
I
And,
do.
and we also have Kam Majd, who has spent 45 years climbing in and out of cockpits. He's the author of High Wire. So welcome, Kam.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Pat, and the guests and everybody else. I'm not nearly as qualified as Lisa with all of the things in the past she has done. As you pointed out, 44 years in and out of cockpits, 35 of those with American Airlines. I retired a year ago as a 777 captain, and somewhere along the line got bit with the writing bug. And pulled out Microsoft Word, started typing chapter 1. I was very fortunate. It kind of worked out. The novel kind of did well. It was bought by Random House, and then the following novel as well. But the first one came out right about 9/11, and it was about an airport terrorism thing, and it was sold to them 2 years prior to 9/11. So that was a challenge by itself. But other than that, I'm very fortunate to be here, and thank you guys for having me.
That's wonderful. And I'm very excited to hear how you started, because like you, I came very late to the author career. I published my first book just before my 70th birthday. So I'm always very excited when I hear of another writer who hasn't started in their 20s. So thank you for that, Kim. That's great. And our third guest is Gary Smith. Gary, we have met before last year on the book fair, so it's lovely to see you again. You're an entrepreneur, photographer, and the author of the Warren Stilgrave series, along with the award-winning book, A Collection of Short Stories and Poems. So you're a very busy man. Perhaps you'd just like to give us a brief introduction to yourself.
Well, it's funny that we have a pilot on here, because when I was 13, 14, I used to design balsa wood gliders and rubber band planes, and I was destined to become an aeronautical engineer, we thought. But my sophomore year in high school, I decided to drop all my college prep classes and decided I wanted to just go off into life. And so upon graduation during the Vietnam War, you serve. And I got into the reserve program, so I only had like about 10 months of active duty time. Come back, got married, went up and joined the labor temple, started my working career as a laborer. From that, I ended up being an electrician apprentice, got in the apprenticeship program, 9 years of running pretty large electrical jobs, started an electrical company that become a multi-million-dollar company that we worked in 32 different states. And so it gave me a large array of people through that, from working with laborers, trying to put food on the table for their family, to being in large corporate rooms, negotiating million-dollar contracts, to spend a lot of time suing people, large corporations, for those last payments. And so a lot of courtroom time. So it gave me a whole array of characters and people and dialogue to draw from for the Warren Stilgrave series of books. And so it's been enjoyable. And yeah, the last 4 books have won awards. And so it's been, I started late, I retired, sold my business, and started writing. And here I am today. So it's a pleasure to be with everybody. And it's a great group of people, authors and creative people are great to hang with, so thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And it's funny because in this panel, everybody, I think, I don't know about Lisa, I think Lisa as well, we all started writing after a certain age. Not telling we are old, of course, no.
Yeah, well, some of us are.
But Lucia, I agree with you. And obviously you're far too young to be in that category, as are most of you. But I think as we're older, we've got all those life experiences to draw on, which makes our writing much richer. There's so much, we've done so much. Whereas I look back to when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would never have written then the way I do today, because I didn't have the life experience. And I guess that applies to all of us. But as I always say in these panels, I talk too much. I think that's probably a commonality between authors. And so if I talk too much and you're getting annoyed, just shut me up, please. So moving on, Lisa, could you just tell us a little bit about how you started and how your background kind of got you into the author career?
Okay, it's actually a really ironic story. So, as I mentioned, I've been counseling families for 30 years. I've counseled thousands of families. I've run support groups. I also did not write my first book till later in life. It was actually released in 2015. But during my tenure of counseling families, I did finally branch off and start my own consulting business. And I was called over to a client's home one day, and they were at their wits' end. Her father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and her mother-in-law had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So they called me over. It had been about 2 years since they each had the parents' diagnosis. And by the time I went over there, she said, well, we just want to kind of pick your brain. We just want to ask you questions. We are so frustrated. It's been 2 years since our parents were diagnosed with their respective diseases. And we are so just disgusted with the way this whole thing is played out and disappointed because nobody will give us any valuable information. Well, after we had our diagnoses, it was like, okay, have a nice life, get your affairs in order. We're frustrated because we have not been successful at finding resources available. Now, keep in mind, this was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And resources for families who were living through the dementia journey with a loved one really were not very readily available at the time. So after about 2 hours of her asking me questions, she stops me and she says, Lisa, I'm going to stop the conversation just for a second here because I really want to tell you that in the last 2 hours, you have provided us with more valuable information than we've been able to get anywhere else since our parents were diagnosed. And I'm not saying that it's leading into the answer to your question. So then she says to me, she said, so you really need to write a book because you obviously have a lot of expertise in this subject. People are desperate for your help, for your information. And then she says to me, and it would be really selfish of you not to share what you know. And when she said it that way, there was just something about the way she presented that to me. And trust me, I've been thinking about writing a book for years. I just never sat down and put the pen to paper. But when she said to me, it would be selfish of me not to share my knowledge with others who are going through this, I think that that was my aha realization moment that she was right. I knew she was right. I had heard it from so many people for so many years, but it really was the impetus behind me actually sitting down and writing my first book, was because of that conversation and her saying it would be selfish of me. And I knew she was right. And so I I wrote my first book after that. It took me about another year and a half, but that's actually was the trigger that inspired me to write the book, was because of that conversation I had with Lisa. Her name was Lisa too, and her husband and her mother, and just hearing one more story of frustrated family members who just didn't know how to live day to day with these brain disease diagnoses.
Yeah. It's very difficult. I worked with many patients in the same condition. Even their caregivers, sometimes they don't know what to do. And having a book that can give some idea of how to, behave when you have such a difficult situation it's great, Liz. I'm happy that you had this conversation.
Thank you. Well, and I will tell you honestly that in the 30 years I've been practicing um, professionally, and then going back 20 years with my very first experience with my grandmother, in those 50 years, I have learned, and there's no question in my mind, that the key to successfully living with this disease is for people to understand it. And that's where we fall down, because people really don't understand this disease. They think it really is exclusively about memory loss and confusion. And it is so much more complicated than that. So that's kind of where I start. It's helping people, number one, understand what the disease is doing to the brains of their loved ones, and then the very unique behaviors and symptoms that the disease causes in people, to recognize that as being part of the disease. And then lastly, teaching people, educating people on the most effective ways to respond to the behaviors, because those best practices are actually counterintuitive to the way that we instinctively want to react to them. So that's really what I do. And once people really understand the disease, then they're going to have, number one, a better quality relationship with either the person they're caring for or with their loved one, without the added stress and frustration of not really knowing what to look for, knowing what to recognize, and then most importantly, knowing how to react or respond to anything they say, any way they act. And so that's really what my expertise is in. And it's a long drawn out disease. My grandmother, for example, lived with it for 20 years. The average length of time that a person lives with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia after they start showing symptoms is 8 to 15 years. So that's a really long time for a person, for people to have a relationship with somebody that can't communicate the way they did when their brains were healthy. So I teach them how to do that, and then they can focus on what really matters, and that's spending quality time with their loved ones or the person they're caring for the duration of the disease.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Now, Kam, I don't like heights. I'm very scared about flying. Yeah, depends on the day. And every time I have to fly now, I'm inside the airplane, I remember about you. I said, he flew for 45 years. Nothing is gonna happen with me. So, what inspired you, Kim, to write an aviation thriller? Of course, you're a pilot, but there is something else that made you decide to write a thriller that happens inside the airplane.
Sure. First of all, your fear of heights is a very real thing. So don't be ashamed of it. Don't try to deny it. It is there. It is real. I have held on to many hands over this course of time. I have hugged people and come back there and made sure that they were okay. And I can see the fear in their eyes and the shaking in their hands. And so it's a very real thing, until you can overcome it. As to what really triggered the book, aviation is becoming so much more automated. Cockpits are becoming so much more automated. We used to have 3 pilots in the cockpit. Now we have 2. An entire panel, an entire position has been removed, and all of this is now being supported with computers. So computers are doing the work that human beings used to do. And they're doing a better job for the most part for a lot of it. That's why aviation is so much safer today than it was before. But in the process of this automation, we have become so heavily dependent on computers. For example, I use the flight control of an airplane. That is one of the most highly automated systems that are in an aircraft. So originally, when airplanes were made, the controls were used with the pulley and cable system. So you pulled the yoke in front of you, or you turned it. Pulleys and cables did the work, and some flight control surface moved, and like the fins of a fish through water, the airplane moved around. But then airplanes became bigger and heavier, and pulleys and cables wouldn't do the job. So now they had to go in and create hydraulic systems. This massive pumps that pressure, very high pressure, 3,000 pounds per square inch. It's very high pressure through pipes, and then they send that because the flight control surfaces now are so much bigger, and so they require this pressure. And that worked great for 30 years, 40 years, but they're very hard to maintain, and they're very heavy, and anything that is heavy requires fuel to go back and forth, and expensive. So Kam Majd, fly-by-wire system was the last of the system, and essentially it's all computerized. Computer 1 tells computer 2 what to do. Computer 2 talks to 2 other computers. They all make sure that they're getting the right information. All of this stuff is done in nanoseconds, and then they send a signal to a little bitty motor, and the motor turns around, and the flight control surfaces move. So the weight has been removed. All the maintenance has been removed. You still have a yoke. The pilot still has a yoke. You still pull it, turn it, push it, just like they did before. But all they're doing is really typing on a keyboard. And even the feel, to create a feel that for you to pull the yoke back and to turn it, there is a machine that's created down there that's below to make you feel like you're doing something when you're actually doing nothing but typing on a keyboard. So they've made it very realistic in that sense. But again, imagine our dependency on these computers. Now, the computers are great. They back each other up, and they work great, and they're just the safety has gone through the roof. But in my world, I started thinking, when I first learned about fly-by-wire, how heavily we are dependent on the computer. So computers don't fail, and when they fail, there's backups that will make sure that they work. But I started thinking to myself, what happens if a computer is programmed to do something wrong? A computer doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. A computer knows simply what it's programmed to do, as unfortunately was the case with the 737 MAX airplanes, 2 of them that crashed over the last 5 years or so. When a computer was telling the pilot that you're about to stall, that then it's pushing the nose down, which is the right thing to do when you stall. You push the nose of the aircraft down, but they were already going down, and the computer misunderstood that they're not going up. They thought it's going down, so it pushed the nose further. So here are these pilots in real life struggling to pull it back, and they watched it all the way to the ground, where the computer overwhelmed and overcame the forces that the pilots has, because the computer has a lot more material, resources at its disposal. And So I asked myself, what if a computer is told what to do, told to do something wrong, a computer virus, and it doesn't know the difference again, and it thinks it's doing the right thing, and it's going to do everything it can to make sure that it follow those instructions. But what if the instructions are wrong? And so when I first learned about the fly-by-wire system and how automated this is, and how it really is just computers upon computers, I said, no, what if that's not the case? What if somebody put something bad in there? And so that was how the story was born. And then it came a question of, okay, who's going to tell the story? Who's going to be your protagonist? And I picked a female pilot because there are so few female pilots now. Only 6% of the pilots in the cockpit right now are female. 94% male even today. So to say it's a male-dominated field, it doesn't even do it justice. It is so predominantly male. But what if a woman isn't there, and she does something, and the airplane, does crash, and then all focus is going to be on her. That she shouldn't have been hired. Maybe she wasn't qualified. Maybe this is not a job for women. Maybe and all the other things that would follow. And so the story began, and I'll make this short, but the story begins at Kennedy Airport in a blizzard. And this was written long before 9/11. On the cover, it says faster than the speed of terror. It takes place in Kennedy. Pretty much the only thing I missed was the terrorist names, it seems like. But it begins in a blizzard where the aircraft controls stop to respond. And we have our female captain in place, Kate Gallagher. And when the aircraft stops to respond, she has two choices, either follow her training, which means, just go around, and would certainly crash the plane in a catastrophic way, or follow her instinct, which was crash the plane on purpose while you're very close to the ground. So she does that, and all of this is in chapter 1, just, first right away. And she does crash the plane, and 6 people die. And now she's blamed for what happened. And so now she has to prove herself throughout the book. And in that world, you get into the world, we see technology and learn about corporate greed and what has caused all this, until we come to the end where, she's face to face with the madman who created the virus. And she learns that there is another aircraft halfway over the ocean that's contaminated with the same virus with no chance of returning. And their only hope, lies on her. And she has to get on a plane and go halfway out there, except if she does, she won't have enough fuel to return.
I think it's truly inspiring, Kam, that the captain of your book is a woman. Yes, Pat?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I'm quite mesmerized by the story. I've got to go and buy the book now. You've really enticed me into reading about it. I'm fascinated by the fact you decided to make the heroine, or whatever, a woman. Was there any point, once it was published, that you actually thought, oh, maybe I should have made her a man? Or were you always happy with your decision?
Not at all. I think it was perfect for me. It was just the way it should have been. Nita Tablip, the publisher at Bantam Dell, pulled me aside. So it was nominated for the Edgars, and she, they all came in, all the publishers, editors, they all come in. And she pulled me aside and she said, I can always tell when a man writes from a point of view of a woman. And with you, I couldn't tell. How did you do it? I never thought about the question, but the answer was, I didn't write from a point of view of a woman. I wrote from a point of view of a pilot, and a person, whoever is actor. So somehow that seemed to work. I have flown with many women pilots over my 44 years in cockpits, especially the 35 at American Airlines. And I found them, no different than men. They're not any weaker. They're not any stronger. There's good ones. There's not such good ones. And there really is not any difference between the two. But I do know that, being in a world where there is such few, when you're a minority, that, it's another step to overcome. If it's just big grown white man behind the cockpit and makes a mistake, well, okay, it's pilot error. Well, if it's not, let's think about it. Okay, this is Sully, you know. But if it's a woman, now you've introduced another characteristic that could be questioned. Maybe it's her ability. Especially in our case, I created an environment where the airline that hired her as the youngest female pilot, and they were at the time being, under the threat of a lawsuit, a discrimination lawsuit. So they hired this woman as the youngest. They paraded her along because she's attractive and showed her, we've hired the youngest female pilot. And then, so when this occurs 10 years later, he's now a captain, all fingers are pointing to her. She was never qualified. She was hired under the threat of a lawsuit, even though what she experienced and what she went through was, twice as hard as what any man had to go through, because they made her really go through the steps, go through the process in her training. Otherwise, they'd be, liable for all kinds of things. And so to have a woman, it just seemed like the right thing, to make it just that much more difficult, because all fingers are going to point to her anyhow. And then here's a woman, she's a young woman, 34, but she's lost her husband. She has a young child. So it's 3 generations of women. Mother is an immigrant, and then their lives are going to be endangered by, what happens and throughout the book. And anyhow, it felt good. So no regrets at all.
That's great. And I can tell that you obviously wrote it completely from the heart and with vast amount of experience of what you said. And that in my view, that makes the best kind of book, when someone writes from their heart and they write about something that they're very knowledgeable about. So thank you, Kam. That was great. I look forward to hearing more, and especially I'm now looking forward to reading it. Right, moving on. Gary, can you tell us about your journey into writing, especially with your latest book, Betrayal?
Yeah, I guess from a very young age, I thought I was trying to write songs, which, when you think about it, it's a really hard thing to do. And it's something a lot of writers, I think, start off wanting to be a poet or to write songs. They can't do it. So it got put away, it was very difficult to do. But around 1994, I was asked to participate with a group of college presidents and people to develop a book for kids having trouble in high school. And I had no clue what I was doing there with these people from USC and UCLA and all these esteemed colleges, and maybe an electrical contractor. But the editor at one point asked everybody to submit 3 articles from an experience for the book. And I wrote 3, and I wrote one on the death of my son. He lived only, he died in my arms after being born he lived maybe 2-3 hours. And it was at a time when my business was near failure. And holding him there was a connection that you wouldn't expect. At least I didn't. But I knew then that I had a choice to make. If I went home, if after this the business failed, he would live eternity with that failure. People would say it was a great business, he lost his son, and it would be on him. So I made a pledge that I would do what had to be done, that it could fail in the future, but it wasn't going to be his failure. It was always going to be my failure. So I submitted it, and nothing, it goes on for about a year. And then when the book was published, they had us all come down for a large send off, give us our plaques, thank us for our contribution to the book and whatnot, right? And so I'm sitting there, and at the end of the meeting, the publisher who had was doing the meeting stood and said, "Before we go, we had one of the submissions that I'd like to read here." And he starts reading my article, and I'm getting very uncomfortable, right? I know who it is. And then at the end, he had me stand up and thank me for the article. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. But on the way out of the crowd, this guy's hollering at me. He says, "Please, Gary, stop." And so I did turn around, and he says, "I'm going through a similar thing, and you've given me a new perspective on life, and I want to thank you for that article." That's when I knew I would start writing. That's when I knew that there was more to this than just selling books or whatever. So it got put away, and then when I retired, I started writing again. I started with the Warren Steelgrave series, and as Hemingway said, to write a good story, you have to write about your own experiences. Well, like I explained before, I got a lot. If there's a character somewhere in my past life here that I can just plug in there from a shoe shine boy to a labor to a greedy CEO of a large corporation. So I started the Warren Steelgrave series, and all of them, I hope, are good. I write them as a good mystery, suspenseful mystery, but there's always a personal conflict in the story. The first book, it was love at first sight with a woman 25 years younger in Italy, and getting her out of the country with terrorists after her. And how do you handle that conflict? The second one was how do two successful career people stay together, living together but separately because of their careers. Are both successful entrepreneurs. And so the series progresses like that. With Betrayal, I never know what I'm going to write about. I just sit down and start writing. Generally around the third chapter, something from the subconscious that's been eating at me for years or for a long time starts to surface and gets woven into the story. And it starts out with the main character, Warren Steelgrave, being approached by the Carabinieri here, who helped him get out of a situation when he was accused for murdering a person. And this guy's son has disappeared. He works for an international task force trying to break up a drug and sex trafficking ring that's worldwide. And they bring these girls into Europe first. They under the promise of being a celebrity or do commercials or models, confiscate their passports. The ones with some talent, that happens to them. The rest end up in brothels and shipped off to the United States in different brothels. And there's a corporation in the entertainment industry that was founded by a person that handles it's like a one-stop shopping center for the entertainment industry. If you're going to want to raise money for a movie, this is the guy you call. He handles everything from legitimate bands and hookers and drugs, and they use the legitimate businesses to launder the money. So he gets drug into this and finds out there's betrayal everywhere. There's betrayal to the girls. There's betrayal to the writers. Congressman is betraying his oath to office. So the local police, there's FBI, because it's worldwide and there's so much money involved in this. And he ends up with a hard drive with the evidence from this company that could put a lot of very important people in jail. So he's trying to get to court, and he doesn't know where he can give this information to, because the betrayal is so worldwide, and it gets into a lot of technical with face recognition and all the new software and all these inner agencies working together to keep him from getting to court. And then the worst betrayal is the betrayal of a very good friend. I won't give away the ending, but it just won political suspense award for New York Big Book Awards. And so far it's been satisfying with the emails and the comments that I've been getting from reviewers and stuff. So very satisfying. The hardest book I've written, see, there's 7 in the series. I'm writing an 8th book in the series right now. But the hardest book that I've ever, it was a great challenge, was a book of short stories. I didn't realize how hard that would be to sit down and write 28 short stories, one right after another, because one's a mystery, then the next one, what do you do? And it's all different characters and it's all different genres, and you're trying to do the beginning, the end, and make a decent story out of maybe 1,500 words or 2,500 words or maybe 8,000 words. And it's that was a real challenge, and it won an award. So that's my journey. And I'd like to hear from the others their writing process. Do they outline a book? Do they do a chapter like I do? I never know what I'm going to write when I sit down. I think I'm at chapter 10. I think this is the end of the book, but then my characters are taken over, and then it just starts going ways I have no clue where it's going. But I try to put through all the stories a subtle message, on how we handle things. How to, there's one book with a lot of murders in it, and I hope people afterwards think of where do they come up with their concepts of or their beliefs on murder, for capital punishment, against capital punishment. Where did they come from? Were they programmed by parents, or from school, or from society? And I hope I hear from people that say, they sit back sometimes and they have to do some introspective work at the end of the book, and that for me is what's gratifying more than anything when I hear from those readers.
Thank you, and congratulations for the awards.
Thank you.
Yes, Lisa, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, now I can. Sorry, I was saying just your name. I said, I hope she's here. Thank you. So, thank you, Gary, again. So, I have a common question for all of you. So, as authors, you've each explored unique themes and genres in your works. Lisa, could you share a memorable moment? Or it can be also an experience from your writing journey that has deeply impacted your perspective as a writer.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's the story that inspired everything that I've done for the last 50 years. And it started with my grandmother. I mentioned to you that she lived with Alzheimer's disease for 20 years. And she only lived a few miles from us. So I grew up with my grandma, and I had a very close relationship with my grandma. And I saw her often. And she was a very sweet, demure lady who just very quiet and, never told a fib in her life. And when I was a teenager, I just gotten my driver's license. I drove over to her house to just visit her, a regular routine visit. And we went and sat in her living room. And I just thought I was going to catch up with her and have a, fairly routine conversation. And all of a sudden she starts telling me about these birds that lived in her mattress that came out at night and pecked at her face. And then she proceeded to tell me that there were rats running everywhere in her house, and she pointed to her living room wall and she said, yeah, don't you see them there? They're running back and forth, and they're invading me. And then the last story she told me was about these men that were frequently trying to break into her house, and they were going to eventually murder her. And they were successfully stealing her jewelry. And I'm sitting there with my mouth wide open because my mother had never said a word about any type of cognitive problems that my grandmother was having. I hadn't noticed anything until this particular day. And so I didn't argue with her. I didn't challenge her. What I did was, now keep in mind, I was 16. I said, Grandma, wow, this is like phenomenal story. These are phenomenal stories you're telling me. I said, let me go see in your bedroom where these birds are living in your mattress. So I walked into her bedroom. She followed me. I threw her covers off. I'm looking for where these birds are coming in and out of her mattress. I pushed the mattress up. I couldn't see anything. And I knew the story was far-fetched, but she was my grandmother and I wanted to believe her, and she was very convincing. And I said, Grandma, I said, so help me here. I want to believe your story about the birds living in your mattress, but can you show me where they're getting in and out? Because I'm not seeing any holes or anything. And she looks me square in the face, right in the eyes, and said, oh, Lisa, they're there. They're just very, very clever. And this turns out it's a classic response to somebody with dementia, because they always will come up with some kind of a cover story or an explanation for why they believe what they believe. This is called a false belief. So that was my memorable moment, but it even kind of went farther than that, because I left, I went to my house. I said to my mother, I just heard the most outrageous stories I think I will ever hear in my entire life from Grandma. And I told her what the stories were. And I said, why didn't you tell me that there was something wrong with her? And her response was, because we don't talk about those things, which was very true at the time. They didn't even call it Alzheimer's back then. It was called senile dementia. But the thing that also made this so memorable for me was not just hearing stories about birds living in her mattress and coming out at night and pecking at her face, but it turns out that she was calling the police 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. And I'm not aware of any of these things going on. So my mother admitted that, yeah, she had been diagnosed with senile dementia, but we don't talk about it. And then one day there was a knock on the door, and it was the chief of police, and he comes in. I'm standing there. He looks straight at my mom and he says, ma'am, you really need to do something with your mother. She is a nutcase. We responded to her calls the first couple times she called us, and of course we didn't find anything, but she continues to call us every single day, 5, 6, 7 times a day, and we just don't have the time or the resources to keep responding to this foolishness. She is a nut and you need to do something with her. Well, that was my defining moment, because I knew my grandmother was not a nut. There was something wrong with her. And to have the chief of police just rush to a judgment at that time and call my grandma a nut, when obviously there was something medically wrong with her, and ordered my mother to do something with her because it was inconveniencing them, that stayed in my brain. It never left. And I think that's part of the reason why I decided to make this my career, because I was incensed that this man would have the nerve to call my grandmother a nut when he didn't really even ask any questions if she'd seen a doctor. He was there to try to, supposed to protect her, but instead of, handling it in a professional, caring way, he just comes over to the house and demands that my mother put my grandmother someplace because she was a nut. And I think that was the defining moment for me, where I felt, as I continued down this path, that I needed to change people's paradigm about the disease. And even up until a couple of years ago, things really haven't changed that significantly. It's only been since COVID that people have access to more information. People are talking about it. There's a lot of celebrities that are now admitting that they have been diagnosed. So things are starting to change, even though it's been almost 50 years, but they're not changing fast enough. And it's a little bit scary and intimidating, because the Alzheimer's Association and the World Health Organization have projected that the number of people who will develop Alzheimer's disease worldwide in the next 23 years is going to triple. And honestly, as a society, we are not prepared for it. People still don't even understand this disease, let alone being prepared to take care of and manage all the people that will be developing it if a cure or a treatment is not found. So that's really was the impetus for me, and it has never left me. It has bothered me my entire life. And I just, was very protective of my grandma. And I just couldn't believe that a police officer would have handled the situation the way he did. And I was bound and determined to, help people have a better understanding of these diseases, and how they impact the lives of everybody involved, including family members, caregivers, police officers, everybody. So that's kind of the mission that I've been on all this time.
I speaking from a personal point of view, I'm delighted you have, because I too have experience of it with both my mother and my great aunt. I was just a teenager when my great aunt came to live with us, because she lived alone and she kept roaming, and like you say, the police were constantly taking her home. And so my parents took her in. They really couldn't do it because they had 4 kids, no money, tiny house. Anyway, Auntie Rose came and stayed with us. And she used to wake my sister and I up in the middle of the night and say, come on, we've got to pack. We've got to run away because the Russians are coming and your mum and dad downstairs are talking to them. And it was, as a child, it wasn't scary because I loved her dearly, but it was unnerving to be woken at 3 a.m. And then she started thinking everyone was after her. And we had some dreadful times. But all the time, as you say, I knew that she was still my Auntie Rose. She'd always been the brightest, most intelligent woman. And suddenly she was this scared person who everyone, as you say, just dismissed as a nutcase. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. So thank you for that, Lisa. And with your extensive flying experience, obviously you've got lots of stories to draw on, but would you say there was one particular incident that inspired you to write your book?
Yeah, there was in 45 years, there have been 5 incidents where I really wish I was on the ground. And so you can, any of the emergencies that occur, so much of aviation is just pure boredom, it's just routine stuff, 99.99% of it. But that 1 out of 1,000 seconds where it is not, you have an instant to react to things. The problem is you just don't know which second that is. It could be now, it could be, when you're totally bored, or you're in the bathroom, as was the case with, some of the other flights that have happened. So there was several of these things, but I took so much of this from my personal, experiences. For example, who to choose, choosing a minority, choosing a woman as your protagonist, as I explained before. That came from a personal experience. I was a minority myself. I was born in Iran. I was the first Iranian ever hired by American Airlines, and so it was odd to be out there coming back from a general aviation background when everybody I'm flying is driving F4s and F14s and F18s and F whatevers, and carrier landings. And here's a guy from Iran. What are you doing here? So that was, personal experiences that brought that. But specifically, the fear of aviation, just seeing people that are so afraid of flying and so many things that have happened. When you see that, trying to show it to them that by showing what happens in the cockpit, that it is no big mystery, that there is nothing to worry about. By the way, everybody's always afraid of flying because of turbulence. You're sitting in the back, this place is bouncing around, you think you're sure this is going to tear apart and we're all going to die. Just put in the back of your mind one simple fact, that no aircraft, no airline type aircraft has ever crashed due to turbulence, ever in the history of aviation. So just put that in the back of your mind when you're doing that. But seeing people be that afraid, like we had a woman one time hit, she was in her 50s, it was her first time flying ever. Being in an airplane, and she had picked a terrible day, storms everywhere, bouncing around, and I'm going, guys, you picked this up after 50 years. But when we saw her doing that, and I went back and forth with her a lot, make sure we were going from New York to LA, make sure she was okay and all was well. But at some point, he said, it's just, if people get to see what it's like inside and what it takes for something to crash or some bad thing to happen, then maybe they won't be quite as afraid, And so I can't say there was any single event. But when the stories came together and I saw the fear that the people had, I said, there was a way to make this more normal, make this seem like, it's less of everything that they think it is, and it's okay. You're going to get here. And in one tiny bit of stat again, you go, you want to go and get a gallon of milk, get in your car, drive 2 blocks, get a gallon of milk. You got 1 in 5,000 chance of getting killed in your car. You're going to get in an airplane, go from here to New York, or Sydney or where you are, or Rome or Milan or any of those places. You got 1 in 11 million chance. 1 in 5,000 versus 1 in 11 million. So when you put some of these stats in the back of your mind, maybe it won't be as mysterious and as scary and as all of those things that is out there. So that was a bit of it. One of those things that contributed.
Wonderful. Good to know.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lucia. I just think, Kam, listening to you, with your vast experience, you should just write a little handbook why people shouldn't be frightened of flying. Because people would listen to you as a very experienced pilot. They would know that you knew what you were talking about safety-wise. So there we are.
If you can just get that one piece of information out, that no aircraft has ever crashed due to turbulence, not airline type aircraft, ever, going back up. Well, they've only been around maybe 80 years, not, and ever. I mean, that alone, because it's turbulence that you're afraid of. You're sitting in the back of an airplane, with the other guy's seat right in your face. You can't move. You can't do anything. You're jammed in place and you're bouncing all over the place like a roller coaster. You're sure those wings are going to tear apart. And, and now as climate change starts to happen, we're going to get more turbulence, more storms, more people being afraid. Just nothing has ever happened. When these aircraft are certified, they have such rigid certification through them that the aircraft will stay together no matter what. What the aircraft can handle, no one on the inside can handle. People on the inside will not be able to handle. The negative G's, positive G's that they does, and they anyhow, it's impossible for an aircraft. If you just know that, if that doesn't work, have a Bloody Mary. Just think of it, think of it as a ride. You're in a roller coaster. You're going to get out the other end and you're going to say, whoa, that was crazy. I guarantee it. I mean, if it's not, then you'll be the first one where this happens to in history. you know, if that happens, buy a lottery ticket because things are in your favor.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So much. That's great. Sorry, Lucia, over to
No
you.
problem. I don't go to roller coasters. No.
Neither do I.
Then a Bloody Mary works really good.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't mind flying and I don't mind the turbulence, but I do mind roller coasters. I don't know why.
And Gary, for you,
I've already shared the moment
yeah,
that I knew I would at some point would write.
yes.
And the other was receiving a letter from Ansel Adams inviting me to his workshops for my photography. You know, that set a kind of a path for the writing that it would be creative writing, that it would be would be fiction, and because you have a lot of leeway in building characters. And I guess the pleasure I get from writing is when I do hear from readers, especially in a series, same characters keep appearing from book to book to book. And when I get emails from readers worried about a character, that they're afraid this character is drinking too much and gonna, and they're talking to them in they're writing as if these are real people. And I know I feel like I've given some entertainment satisfaction to somebody, that they would take the time and worry about this character or that character. The worst was when a main character got murdered, and and I got a lot of email for that. I mean, people were upset that this poor woman was murdered, and it's like, well, she's a character in a book, you know. But it get, you know, and in that particular character, it was my daughter's favorite character, so I still hear from her about getting rid of that character. So those are the things that give me the pleasure about writing. And then to win awards for being, you know, suspenseful. I know the writing's well, the story's good, and then I hear from people who understand the woven message in there, that you know, I hope they get some pleasure out of, and some introspective, and make them they see the world from a little different perspective. So I think of that guy telling me that, and I try to put that in every story somewhere for somebody.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much. And Pat, can you do the closing, please?
Of course I can. Just before we close, could I just, in maybe 2 or 3 words, could you just say what you're going to do in the future? Because I want to know if you're doing more books. So just 2 or 3 words, very quickly, because we're running out of time. Gary first, as you've come first on my.
I'm in process of finishing a 9th book. It'll be the 8th book in the series.
Perfect. Thank you. Kam, how about you?
Silent Voices, about 2 sisters. One is born and raised in the US, one is in Afghanistan. Neither know about each other. Takes place 30 days before the US withdrawal, and it's a thriller, and they find out about each other, and it's another fast-paced thriller, and get your hankies out before the end.
That sounds like a fabulous read. I must hear about that. Thank you. And Lisa, just a couple of 2 or 3 words from you about your future plans.
Okay, looking in my crystal ball, I do not see any more books. I host 2 podcasts. One is exclusively about Alzheimer's disease. The other is a historically based podcast. And after the first of the year, I'm launching a television series about living with Alzheimer's disease.
Wonderful. Well, I have to say, I'm really sad this panel has come to an end, because it's been fascinating talking and getting to know all of you and your books. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute joy, and hopefully we can all keep in touch and learn about how everyone's writing journeys are going. Over to you, Lucia, to finish us off.
Yeah, we'd like to express our deep appreciation to our wonderful guests today, Lisa, Kam, and Gary. Your insights and experiences have truly enriched our discussion. So thank you very much. And for those interested in their work, please check our website for more information on their books. Stay tuned for our upcoming panels. And again, thank you for joining us today at the RV Book Fair. And we look forward to seeing you next time.